Well, good morning. Welcome to American Reversion. I'm Steve Smith, and how are you all today? I want to talk a little bit about a great divide. I learned something this weekend that kind of surprised me. You would have thought I wouldn't be surprised about this stuff anymore, but I was. And so I want to talk about that. Before we get into it, I want to remind you that this is brought to you by the Stonemont series, my books about preparing for, surviving, and rebuilding after a collapse. We might be headed for one, mightn't we? Whether it's economic or governmental or worldwide or whatever, we don't know what's happening. But if you hadn't read them, I think you'd like them. They're about conservative and fundamental values. They're about family, about community, about rebuilding according to God's will. And they're available either through Amazon, in paperback or Kindle, and from me, autographed if you would like them. And the links on how to do that are down there. I also want to thank all of you who have come over and supported the channel by joining us on Patreon. The link down is also down below. I do put up some extra content over there, but I know that quite a bit. Funny stuff, cool stuff, interesting stuff. But I know that most of you do it in order to support the channel, and I really appreciate that. A great divide. We are heading into an election. It's not that far off. You know, some time back we couldn't wait for it, right? And now it's coming along. We hope that it's going to work out the way we want, but it certainly is a situation driven by a great divide in our country. We'll see what happens. Keep talking to your friends. Keep trying to convince people. And if it turns out that the more conservative side wins, I won't say that's my side. I'm not a Republican, just like I'm not a Democrat. I'm a reversionist, like many of you are. But if the people with whom we agree more with win, we need to hold their feet to the fire after they take office and make sure they do, or try to get them to do, what we want them to do, and that's return to the foundational principles of our country under God's leadership and protection. And I think if we get back to that, God will continue to bless this country. I think He's been withholding some because of the way this country has turned, and I don't blame Him a bit. Not that it's up to me to blame or make judgment on what He does. We know that He's a just God, and the Bible is replete with situations in which people who once blessed turned away from Him and suffered the consequences until they came back. Excuse me just half a second. Okay, so a divide that I want to talk about is the divide that's on our side, or at least what we would consider to be on our side. This past weekend, we were down in Warsaw, Missouri. Kelly set up her booth at the Warsaw Heritage Days. It's a great place. Warsaw, I talk about Warsaw in one of my books. I think it's the Renewal, if I'm not mistaken. Warsaw is a great area. It's actually a little bit north of an area that my family moved to after that dust up in the 1860s and came into southern and central Missouri. And so it's an area of Missouri with which I'm very well acquainted, and we love it. Had a great time, great people down there, and we enjoyed meeting everyone, made new friends and new contacts and all of that. And I have put up a, maybe I'll put it up here. Maybe I'll put it up on the Patreon side of this, a little tour through the area and talking about creating an alternate economy. And I take it through a walk through there. But one of the people that I met, and at first I wanted to interview him for a video, and I turned out not doing it for a reason that I'll explain here. I was walking through and looking at the different booths, and I came upon a booth for a local cattle company, and so I stopped by and met the guy. Seemed like a hard-working guy, and his wife was there, and his brother-in-law, and his son was there. His son was just so well-spoken, and so we got to talking, and this young man, this young cattle farmer, was so on target with what he was talking about. explaining why he was raising his cattle, why he wanted to make sure that he was providing good American-grown beef, and telling me something about the international markets, most, which I knew because I have other interests in cattle. But he was on target, and he was on fire, and explaining why he wanted to be a part of changing this country back to where it should be. And boy, I was with him 100%. I applauded him, and I said, would you mind repeating that? I told him about the channel. This was about Integrative Preparedness Channel, which I'm not going to put it on there. I never did shoot it, and I'll explain why. But it's really a lesson for here. I said, would you mind if I shot a video of you saying exactly what you said to me there? I think this is a great message. And, they looked up the Integrative Preparedness, his son did, the channel, and found it and said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And so he said, but I'd rather change my shirt first. And I said, well, he says, could you come back later? I said, yeah, I'll come back later. So I messed around the festival there for a few hours, and really looking forward to going back and interviewing him. So I went back and said hello, and he said, my wife's not here. And I said, well, I understand, or my wife left, something like it. My wife left. I said, well, I understand. My wife doesn't like to be on camera either. Well, no, she'll be back. And, he's you know how you like a straight talking person, and he had been straight talking before, but now he was getting on the rude and kind of aggressive side. And I said, oh, well, okay, when do you think she'll be back? I don't know. I says, well, okay. And so we got to talking, and I says, well, do you want to wait until she gets back? Yeah, he kind of did. So we got to talking anyway, so I wanted to talk some more with him because I had been impressed with him. And he said, we talking about how to get the country turned back, and he was telling me again about everything that he believed in, and I was with him 100%. And I said, the problem is with our country is that half the people don't feel like we do. They feel totally different than we do. And he leaned back and he said, I don't believe that. And it wasn't like, gosh, that's too bad, or man, it's hard to believe that people would feel that way. It was a challenging way. His tone of voice and his attitude and his body language, it was almost like saying, you're a liar. I don't believe what you just told me. And I was a little bit taken aback. And he started getting loud, and he started going, those riots you saw in Kansas City? That was only 10%, I guess he was talking about. I don't know, the things that the last couple of years after the most recent upsettedness in the cities. He says, that was only 10% of the people. I'll tell you, the rest of them out there, when they look at what they're paying for groceries, when they look what they're paying for gas, when they look what they'd have to pay to buy one of my T-shirts, he says, they feel the same as us. We're all the same. And so I tried to let him know. I said, well, no, that's not true. There's a lot of people out there that don't mind. That don't mind these high prices because they are sold a bill of goods. They believe what Uncle Joe's telling them about the causes behind this. And most of them look to the government as a sugar daddy. And he just started, no, he wouldn't have any of that. And I said, well, here's the problem. I says, this state, meaning Missouri, it's run by Kansas City and St. Louis, with a little bit of liberal smattering in Columbia, which is University of Missouri, and Jeff City, which is politicians, and a little bit of Springfield, sadly Springfield, because a bunch of libs are moving in there. And I says, the thing is that people vote, acres don't. So we can look at our state and see that it's almost all red except for these big blue dots, that represent Kansas City and St. Louis. But that's where the votes are. And I'd explain, and he wasn't having any of it. He just thought I was a fool, I was an idiot, and finally he said, no, you're all, you don't get it. People are all the same. And I finally got a little straight with him because he finally irritated me enough. And I said, I was a cop in Kansas City for a long time. I remember the 1968 riots. I grew up in Kansas City. I know Kansas City. And Kansas City is what you saw on the news. And I gave him about a 3-minute lesson on this. And I'll give him this. He stayed quiet, but you could tell he was irritated. He didn't want to learn. He wasn't interested. And the funny thing was, the guy who was back behind him, I think it was his brother-in-law, the whole time, this young, and I'm sure he's hardworking. He's probably a great guy, hardworking guy, trying to build his cattle company. And but he was mad at this guy who was telling him that different than what he already believed, and his brother-in-law back behind there was just nodding, going, yep, to what I was saying. Yep, I think that guy had been out, a little bit more into the world than this young fella. So when I got done explaining to him the truth of things, I wished him a good day and the best of luck. And I did not go back and make a video on him. That's too bad. And there will probably be some people that say, well, you should have. You should have gone back because he had something. No. I don't put up with rudeness. And see, he's not going to get anywhere. He had a wrong idea about things. And he had a wrong idea because of his limited exposure to the world. Okay? The thing is, I don't go down and try to talk to people about, soybean prices, because I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to go down and tell him how to raise cattle, because I'm not a cattleman. The problem is in so much of our base, as it were, what we would think is our base. Just like the other side, we say, so much of what they know just ain't true. We have them in ours too, and this shows a great separation. Now I probably will. I know some people with a cattle operation in Kansas, and I'm going to go interview them for this because they're nice. They have a better idea of what's going on, and I wish this young fellow the best of luck. And his son was just amazing. The biggest regret I have is his son was I really wanted his son to have a chance to get on there. He's got about a 12-year-old son who's just sharp as a tack. But this young fella showed that so much out there, and I have to say it surprised me a lot, that somebody who had those kinds of beliefs that we share actually thought that most of the other side felt pretty much the same way we do. They don't realize these people are steeped in socialism. They're steeped in Marxism. They're essentially, if they're not full-blown communists now, they're headed in that direction. And so these are the people that I talk about so often and who don't know. These are the people we have to reach. These are the people that can be swayed if they only know the truth about the opposition. So I thought that would be a good lesson, that if we're going to have any hope of winning over the division, against the other side, between those and us, there is a great division. We also have to win the divisions on our side. The great many people who just don't realize the truth of the left. Okay. because they're busy working, right? They're busy working. They assume, I had family like that. They couldn't imagine that anybody would take government from the money unless they were just starving and broken, because people just wouldn't do that. You know, very naive. But that naivete is what's driven our country. Well, the Marxism on one side and the naivete on our side is what's allowed things to crumble to the way they are. So anyway, thought I'd share that with you. I wish that young man the very best. I hope that maybe he'll reflect on some of the things that I told him, and maybe as he gains exposure to the world, he will, his understanding will evolve, and it will make him a good part of our efforts. But we will see. Until then, get out there and talk to people. Remember, this is brought to you by my books, the Stone Mount series. How to get them is down below. You can get them from Amazon, either in paperback or Kindle, or you can get autographed copies from me. And you can help support our channel if you would like to by joining us as a patron over on Patreon, and the link to that is down there too. So we've got an interesting month ahead of us, and then I think a whole lot of interesting time after that. Let's get ready. Let's talk to the people that we think that we can persuade and get them, out there voting the right way, because this is the fight we've got now. We don't want the fight that is coming if we don't win this one. So you all have a great day. Remember that America needs a reversion. It needs you to be a part of it. It needs me to be a part of it. It needs all of us to be a part of it. And you have a good day. Bye-bye.